The barn door creaked open just after dawn, and Beatrice Abbott froze in place when she saw the stranger sprawled across a pile of hay in the corner, his chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of exhausted sleep. Her hand tightened around the milk pail she carried, and for a moment she considered running back to the house for her father's old rifle. But something stopped her. The man looked more broken than dangerous, his clothes torn and dusty, his face bruised and swollen on one side. His dark hair was matted with what might have been dried blood, and his boots were so worn she could see his socks through the holes. Beatrice set down the pail carefully and stepped closer, her footsteps soft on the hay-strewn floor. She was 23 years old and had been running her small ranch outside Helena, Montana alone for nearly 2 years since her father passed. In that time, she had learned to be cautious but not cruel, wary but not heartless. The man stirred as a beam of morning sunlight fell across his face. His eyes opened slowly, and she saw they were a deep brown, warm despite the obvious pain he was in. He tried to sit up quickly, then winced and pressed a hand to his ribs. "Easy," Beatrice said, keeping her distance. "You are hurt." The stranger looked at her with an expression that mixed fear and shame. "I am sorry, miss. I did not mean to trespass. I just needed somewhere safe to rest for a few hours. What happened to you?" She studied his face more carefully now. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with strong features beneath the bruising and dirt. He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "Some men in town took exception to me winning at cards, accused me of cheating, which I was not. They followed me out of the saloon and decided to teach me a lesson with their fists and boots. You need a doctor." "Cannot afford one, miss. I will be on my way. Thank you for not shooting me or calling the law." Beatrice crossed her arms. "Where will you go?" The man looked away, and she saw his jaw tighten. "I had nowhere else to go last night. That is the truth. I have been drifting from town to town, picking up work where I can. My horse threw a shoe 2 days back, and I sold my saddle to pay for the repair and a hot meal. Those men took what little money I had left." Something in his voice, in the honest defeat of his words, touched her. She had known what it was like to feel alone and overwhelmed. After her father died, creditors had come calling, neighbors had offered condescending advice, and more than one man had suggested she should sell the ranch and find herself a husband to take care of her. She had refused them all and fought to keep her home through sheer, stubborn determination. "What is your name?" she asked. "Lucas. Lucas Ramsey, miss. I am Beatrice Abbott. This is my land." She paused, making a decision that felt both reckless and right. "You look like you could use a decent meal and some proper rest. I have work that needs doing around here if you are willing to earn your keep for a few days while you heal up." Lucas stared at her. "You would trust a stranger?" "I am not sure I trust you yet," she said honestly, "but I do not think you mean me harm. And I need help fixing the fence on the north pasture before my cattle wander off. My hired hand quit 3 weeks ago to head to the gold fields, and I have been managing alone since then." He straightened up despite the obvious pain it caused him. "I am a hard worker, Miss Abbott. If you are willing to give me a chance, I will not let you down. Come up to the house. I will clean those cuts and fix you some breakfast. Then we can talk about what needs doing." Beatrice led him out of the barn and across the yard to her small but sturdy ranch house. The Montana morning was crisp and clear, the mountains visible in the distance against a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. This was June of 1883, and the territory had been a state for nearly 20 years, but Helena still had that wild frontier edge to it. Inside, she directed Lucas to sit at the kitchen table while she pumped water into a basin and gathered clean cloths. She had learned basic doctoring from her mother before she died when Beatrice was 15. Living this far from town, you learn to tend your own wounds and illnesses. As she cleaned the cut above his eyebrow, she became aware of how close they were, how she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, and the way his breath caught when she touched a tender spot. He smelled of hay and horses and the outdoors, and despite the dirt and blood, there was something solid and real about him that she found oddly comforting. "This might sting," she warned before pressing a whiskey-soaked cloth to the gash on his cheekbone. He did not flinch, though his hands tightened on the edge of the table. "I have had worse. You get in fights often." "No, miss, I am not a brawler by nature, but sometimes trouble finds you whether you go looking for it or not." She could not argue with that. Trouble had found her plenty of times in the past 2 years. When she finished cleaning his wounds, she cooked eggs and biscuits while he sat quietly at the table, watching her move around the kitchen. She could feel his gaze on her and found herself hyper-aware of every movement, every gesture. It had been a long time since she had shared a meal with anyone, longer still since she had been alone with a man near her own age. "This is delicious," Lucas said after his first bite. "Best meal I've had in months." "When was the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning." "A piece of cornbread someone gave me." Beatrice pushed more food onto his plate. "Eat. You will need your strength if you are going to be any use to me." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, madam." After breakfast, she showed him to the small bunkhouse where her hired hand had stayed. It was basic but clean, with a narrow bed, a trunk for belongings, and a washstand. Lucas stood in the doorway looking at it like she had offered him a palace. "This is more than generous, Miss Abbott. Get some rest today. Your ribs need time to heal. Tomorrow you can start on the fence." But Lucas shook his head. "If it is all the same to you, I would rather start working today. I am not used to sitting idle, and I hate to feel like I am taking charity." She understood that pride. It was the same pride that had kept her going when everyone said she should give up the ranch. "All right, but take it easy. I need you healthy, not collapsed in the pasture." They worked together that afternoon, and Beatrice found herself impressed by Lucas's skill and determination. Despite his injuries, he knew his way around ranch work. He could handle tools, judge which fence posts needed replacing, and work steadily without complaint. By evening, they had made more progress than she had managed in the previous 2 weeks working alone. As they walked back to the house in the fading light, Lucas said, "You have a good place here, Miss Abbott. Your father must have worked hard to build it." "He did. And now I am working hard to keep it." She glanced at him. "Some people think a woman should not be trying to run a ranch on her own." "Some people are fools." The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, made her smile. "I think we are going to get along just fine, Mr. Ramsey." Over the next few days, they fell into an easy rhythm. Beatrice would cook breakfast before dawn, and they would eat together in the kitchen, talking about the work that needed doing. Then they would spend the day repairing fences, tending to the cattle, mucking out stalls, and handling the 100 other tasks that ranch life demanded. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in companionable silence. Beatrice found herself looking forward to these evening conversations more than she wanted to admit. Lucas had a quiet way about him, a steady calmness that she found soothing after years of constant worry and struggle. He listened when she talked about her dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build up her herd and maybe start breeding horses. And he shared his own stories, though she noticed he never talked much about his past beyond the last few years of drifting. One evening, about a week after he had arrived, she finally asked him about it. "Where are you from originally, Lucas? You never said." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening sky. "Ohio, Small town outside Cleveland. My father had a farm there. What brought you west? My father died when I was 18. My mother had passed a few years before. I had a younger sister, Emma. She was only 14. His voice grew tight. I tried to keep the farm going, but I did not know enough and we got into debt. The bank took the land. I found Emma a place with a good family in town, people who could give her a proper home and education. Then I headed west to make my fortune and send money back to her. Have you, Beatrice asked gently, made your fortune? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Obviously not. I have sent her what I could over the years, but it is never as much as I hoped. She is 18 now, living with a family in Denver. She writes me when she can, care of general delivery in whatever town I land in. You must miss her. Every day. But she is better off where she is. I have nothing to offer her but a saddle tramp brother who cannot seem to stay in one place long enough to build anything real. Beatrice understood that kind of guilt, that feeling of not being enough. You are building something here, she said quietly. Look at all the work you have done in just a week. That is your ranch, not mine. It could be. The words were out before she fully thought them through, but once she said them, she realized she meant it. I mean, I could use a permanent hand, someone who knows the work and is not going to run off to the gold fields or get bored after a month. The pay would not be much at first, but there would be room and board, and as the ranch grows, so would your share. Lucas turned to look at her, and even in the dim light she could see the surprise on his face. You are offering me a job, a real job. Why not? You are a good worker, and I need the help. It makes sense. What she did not say was that she had come to rely on more than just his labor. She liked having him around, liked the sound of his voice and the way he smiled when something amused him. She liked how safe she felt with him there, how the ranch felt less lonely and overwhelming with someone to share the burden. I would be honored, Miss Abbott, Lucas said, and his voice was thick with emotion. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. I will work hard to prove worthy of your trust. I know you will. And please call me Beatrice. We are partners now, in a manner of speaking. Beatrice, he repeated, and the way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. The summer days grew longer and hotter, and the work on the ranch became a shared endeavor that brought them closer together. Beatrice taught Lucas her father's methods for managing the herd, and Lucas taught her tricks he had learned in his years of wandering, skills picked up from cowboys and ranchers across the West. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, moving in sync like they had been partners for years instead of weeks. But it was the small moments that Beatrice treasured most. The way Lucas always made sure she had the shady side when they rode out to check the cattle in the heat of the day. How he fixed the squeaky hinge on her bedroom door without being asked, because he knew it bothered her. The time he brought her wildflowers from the meadow, claiming he had just happened to see them and thought they might brighten up the house. She caught herself watching him more and more, noticing the way his muscles moved when he lifted fence posts, the concentration on his face when he worked on repairing tack, the gentleness in his hands when he handled a skittish calf. And sometimes she would look up from her own work to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. They did not speak of this growing attraction. The boundary between employer and employee, between a woman alone and a drifter she had taken in out of kindness, felt too delicate to cross with words. But it was there between them, building like a summer storm on the horizon. One particularly hot afternoon in late July, they were working on clearing brush from a drainage ditch when Beatrice lost her footing on the muddy bank and fell. Lucas caught her before she hit the water, his arms strong and sure around her waist. For a moment they stood frozen, her hands on his shoulders, his face inches from hers. She could feel the heat of his body, the rapid beat of his heart, the way his breath caught. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes, I just slipped." But neither of them moved. His eyes searched her face, and she saw in them everything she had been feeling, all the longing and attraction and careful restraint. Then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a claim. But when she kissed him back, her fingers tightening on his shoulders, it deepened into something that made her feel like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had been kissed before, awkward attempts by boys at barn dances when she was younger, but nothing like this. This felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas looked almost frightened. "I should not have done that. I am sorry, I overstepped." "Do not apologize," Beatrice said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I wanted you to." "You did, Lucas. I have wanted you to kiss me for weeks now. I just did not know how to say it." He let out a shaky breath. "I have been half crazy wanting to touch you, talk to you about something more than cattle and fence posts. But you are the owner of this ranch, and I am just a hired hand you found sleeping in your barn. I have no right to court you." "You have every right if I want to be courted." She took his hand, feeling how calloused it was from hard work, how it trembled slightly as his fingers closed around hers. "I do not care about what is proper or what people might think. All I know is that you make me happy, Lucas. Happier than I have been in years. You make me happy too. You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you, who can build something lasting and real." "You already are that man," she said softly. "You just have to believe it." After that day, everything changed and nothing changed. They still worked side by side on the ranch, still shared meals and evening conversations. But now there were stolen kisses in the barn, hands held when no one was around to see, long talks about their hopes and dreams that stretched into the night. Lucas told her about his childhood in Ohio, about his mother who had loved music and his father who had been stern but fair. Beatrice shared memories of her own parents, of learning to ride before she could properly walk, of her mother's laugh and her father's quiet strength. As August arrived and the heat of summer began to ease, they rode into Helena together to sell some cattle and buy supplies. It was the first time they had been in town together, and Beatrice was acutely aware of the looks they received. Lucas stayed close to her side, polite and protective without being overbearing, and she felt proud to have him there. They were loading supplies into the wagon when a man approached. He was well dressed, in his 40s, with the soft hands and confident bearing of someone who had never done a day of manual labor. Beatrice recognized him as Theodore Marsh, who owned the largest ranch in the area, and had been one of the men who had suggested she sell her land after her father died. "Miss Abbott," he said, tipping his hat. "Good to see you in town. How are you managing out there on your own?" "I am not on my own, Mr. Marsh. This is Lucas Ramsey, my ranch hand." Marsh barely glanced at Lucas before turning his attention back to Beatrice. "I heard you had taken on help." "That is good, very sensible. Though I hope you are being careful. A young woman alone with a hired man, people do talk." Beatrice felt her temper rise. "Let them talk. Mr. Ramsey is an excellent worker and has been invaluable to the success of my ranch." "I am sure he has," Marsh said with a condescending smile. "But if you ever find the work too difficult, my offer still stands. I would be happy to buy your land at a fair price. You could move to town, live like a lady instead of working yourself to the bone." "My answer is the same as it has always been, Mr. Marsh. The ranch is not for sale." His smile faded. "You are being stubborn, Miss Abbott. That land is too much for a woman to handle, hired man or not. Your father would not have wanted you to struggle like this." My father wanted me to keep our home, Beatrice said firmly, and that is exactly what I am doing. Good day, Mr. Marsh. She turned away, but not before she saw the flash of anger in Marsh's eyes. Lucas had been loading supplies during this exchange, but she noticed he had positioned himself within easy reach if she needed him. As they climbed onto the wagon and headed out of town, he said, "That man has been trying to get your land for 2 years now. He makes an offer every few months, always claiming it is for my own good, but I know he just wants to expand his holdings. Do you think he would try to force you out? I do not know. He is powerful in this area, has friends in the territorial government. But I have the deed to my land, paid in full. There is nothing legal he can do to take it from me." Lucas was quiet for a moment. There are ways to pressure people that are not exactly legal but are hard to prove. Be careful, Beatrice. Men like that do not like being told no. His concern touched her, but it also reminded her of how vulnerable her position was. A woman alone was always at risk in ways a man would never be. Having Lucas there helped, but what if something happened to him? What if he decided to move on or got hurt, or simply grew tired of the hard life on a struggling ranch? As if reading her thoughts, Lucas reached over and took her hand. "I am not going anywhere, Beatrice. I know I have been a drifter, but that was because I had nothing worth staying for. Now I do." "You are worth staying for." She squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "I am glad you found my barn that night. So am I. Best piece of luck I ever had." When they returned to the ranch, they unloaded the supplies together, working in the easy partnership they had developed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucas pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her forget everything but the feel of his lips on hers, his hands tangled in her hair. "I love you," he whispered against her mouth. "I know it is too soon, I know I should wait, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you, Beatrice Abbott, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me." Joy bloomed in her chest, so intense it almost hurt. "I love you too, Lucas. I think I started falling for you that first morning in the barn when you looked so lost and hurt, but still so determined to do right." "Marry me," he said. "I do not have a ring. I do not have savings or property to offer you. All I have is my love and my promise to work every day to make you happy and build a good life together. But if that is enough, if you can take a chance on me, I swear I will never give you cause to regret it." "Yes," Beatrice said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Helena. Beatrice wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Lucas wore new clothes they had bought together, the first fine things he had owned in years. Emma came up from Denver for the wedding, a lovely young woman with her brother's warm eyes and ready smile. She embraced Beatrice like a sister, thanking her for making Lucas so happy. "I have never seen him like this," Emma confided as they prepared for the ceremony. "He has always carried so much guilt about me, about not being able to do more. But with you, he is light, happy. You have given him a home and a purpose. Thank you." "He has given me just as much," Beatrice said honestly. "I was so alone before he came. Now I cannot imagine my life without him." Theodore Marsh did not attend the wedding, but Beatrice heard through mutual acquaintances that he was not pleased about her marriage. She tried not to worry about it. What could he do now that she had a husband? The ranch was legally hers, and with Lucas by her side, she felt capable of handling whatever challenges came their way. The first months of their marriage were blissful. They worked the ranch together, making improvements and plans for the future. Lucas had ideas about breeding better stock, about building up their horse herd to sell to the army or to ranchers farther west. Beatrice shared her dream of expanding their land, of buying the adjoining property when old Mr. Henderson finally decided to sell. But more than the work, Beatrice treasured the intimacy of sharing her life with Lucas. She loved waking up next to him, feeling his arms around her in the night. She loved the way he looked at her across the breakfast table, like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She loved how they could work all day and never run out of things to talk about, how they could sit in comfortable silence and feel completely content. In October, as the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, and then he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses in the barn. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Yes, Lucas, in the spring if I am calculating right." He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down looking worried. "Should I not have done that? I do not want to hurt you or the baby." She laughed at his concern. "I am pregnant, not made of glass, but perhaps no more spinning for a while." That winter was hard, as Montana winters often were, but they faced it together. Lucas insisted that Beatrice take on less of the heavy work, which frustrated her independent nature, but also touched her with its protectiveness. They spent the long evenings by the fire, Lucas reading aloud from books Beatrice loved or working on building a cradle for the baby while she sewed tiny clothes and blankets. In March, when Beatrice was 7 months along and starting to feel large and ungainly, Theodore Marsh came calling. Lucas was out checking on the cattle when Marsh rode up to the house with 2 of his ranch hands. Beatrice met them on the porch, one hand on her swollen belly. "Mr. Marsh, what can I do for you? Miss Abbott, or I suppose it is Mrs. Ramsey now. I have come with a generous offer. I am prepared to pay you $15,000 for your land. That is more than fair market value, enough for you and your husband to start fresh somewhere safer, somewhere more suitable for raising a child. My land is not for sale, Mr. Marsh. I have told you that repeatedly." "I am trying to help you," Marsh said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "This ranch is struggling. Everyone knows it. You barely have enough cattle to make it through the winter, and now you have a baby coming. Be sensible. Take the money and go." I said no. Marsh's face hardened. "Then you are a fool. This land should be mine. My ranch borders yours on 3 sides, and I have the resources to make proper use of it. Your father was too stubborn to sell, and now you are making the same mistake." "This conversation is over," Beatrice said firmly. "Please leave my property." "You will regret this," Marsh said. "When the bank comes calling because you cannot pay your debts, when your cattle die because you cannot afford to feed them, when your husband realizes he married into poverty, you will wish you had taken my offer." He rode away, and Beatrice stood on the porch, shaking with anger and fear. The truth was that money was tight. They had enough to get by, but just barely. A hard winter or a bad season could ruin them, and now with a baby coming, the stakes felt even higher. Lucas returned an hour later and found her still on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the March wind. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" She told him about Marsh's visit, about the offer and the thinly veiled threats. Lucas's jaw tightened with anger. "That man has no right to harass you, especially not in your condition." "What if he is right, though? What if we cannot make the ranch profitable enough? What if we are being stubborn and foolish?" Lucas sat down beside her and took her hands in his. "Listen to me, Beatrice. We are going to make this work. I did not marry you for your land or your money. I married you because I love you, because you are the strongest, most determined woman I have ever known. Together we can handle whatever comes, and we are not alone anymore. We have each other, and soon we will have our child. That is worth more than any amount of money Marsh could offer." His words steadied her, reminded her of why she was fighting so hard to keep this place. It was not just land and cattle. It was home, it was legacy, it was the future she wanted to build with the man she loved. "You are right," she said. "We will make it work." And they did. As spring arrived and the ranch came back to life, they worked harder than ever. Lucas bought a few horses at a good price from a rancher who was moving back east, and they began the breeding program he had envisioned. Beatrice, despite her advancing pregnancy, managed the books and correspondence, reaching out to buyers and making connections that would help them sell their stock at better prices. In late April, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lucas feared he would lose both Beatrice and the baby. But she was as strong as he always knew she was, and just after dawn on a beautiful spring morning, their boy came into the world with a lusty cry that announced he was ready to take on life. "What should we name him?" Lucas asked, cradling the tiny bundle while Beatrice rested. "I was thinking about my father's name, Benjamin. Benjamin Lucas Ramsey." "Benjamin," Lucas repeated, looking down at his son's red face and tiny fists. "That is perfect." Fatherhood changed Lucas in ways Beatrice had not expected. He became even more focused and driven, working from before dawn until after dark to ensure that his family would never want for anything. But he also made time every evening to hold Benjamin, to talk to him in a soft voice about the ranch and the horses and the wide Montana sky. Watching them together made Beatrice's heart swell with love. Emma came to visit when Benjamin was 2 months old, and she was delighted with her nephew. She had news of her own. She was engaged to a teacher in Denver, a good man who loved her and whom Lucas approved of after a long conversation that made Emma laugh at her brother's protectiveness. "I am so happy for you," Beatrice told her. "You deserve all the joy in the world." "So do you," Emma said, watching Lucas play with Benjamin. "My brother is a different person than he was before he met you. You saved him, Beatrice. He was lost, and you gave him a home and a family and a reason to believe in himself again." "He saved me too," Beatrice said quietly. "I was alone and overwhelmed, trying to prove I could do everything myself. He showed me that accepting help, accepting love, is not weakness. It is strength." That summer, the ranch began to turn a profit for the first time since Beatrice's father had died. The horse breeding program was successful, and they sold several animals at prices that exceeded their expectations. The cattle herd was growing, and they were able to hire a young man from town to help with the work, which eased the burden on Lucas and Beatrice. But their success drew Marsh's attention again. In August, they received notice that Marsh was contesting the boundary lines of their property, claiming that a surveying error years ago meant that part of their north pasture actually belonged to him. It was obviously a ploy to harass them, but it required hiring a lawyer and going through legal proceedings that cost money and time they could not easily spare. Lucas was furious. "He cannot just make up lies and steal our land." "No, but he can make our lives difficult," Beatrice said. "That is what this is about. He is trying to wear us down, hoping we will get tired of fighting and sell to him. Then he does not know us very well." They fought the claim, presenting their father's original deed and survey documents. It took months and cost them money they could ill afford, but in the end, the judge ruled in their favor. The boundary lines were confirmed, and Marsh's claim was dismissed. It was a victory, but Beatrice knew it would not be the last time he tried something. As Benjamin grew from a baby into a toddler, Beatrice marveled at how much their lives had changed. She remembered the morning she had found Lucas in her barn, how uncertain and frightening the future had seemed. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, a son who filled their home with laughter, and a ranch that was finally beginning to thrive. One evening, when Benjamin was 2 years old and playing in the dirt near the porch with wooden horses Lucas had carved for him, Beatrice sat with her husband and watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. "You ever think about that night you slept in my barn?" she asked. Lucas smiled. "All the time. I remember waking up and seeing you standing there looking like an angel in the morning light. I was sure you would chase me off or call the sheriff. I almost did, but something stopped me. What? I'm not sure exactly. Maybe I saw something in you, some quality that made me trust you even when I should not have. Or maybe I was just so tired of being alone that I was willing to take a risk." Lucas took her hand. "I am glad you did. That night I felt like I had hit bottom. I had nothing, no money, no prospects, nowhere to go. I ended up in your barn because it was the only shelter I could find, and I honestly thought I might just stay there and give up on everything. What changed your mind? You did. When you offered me work, offered me a chance instead of judgment, it was like you threw me a lifeline. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I could be worth something, could build something real instead of just drifting. And then I fell in love with you, and everything I wanted in life became clear. I wanted to be worthy of you, to give you and our family a good life." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "You already were worthy, Lucas. You just needed someone to see it, and I did, right from the start. Do you know what I said that morning? When you asked me why I was in your barn, you said you had nowhere else to go. And do you remember what you said when you offered me the job, when you told me I could stay?" Beatrice thought back to that conversation, to the moment when she had made the impulsive decision to trust this stranger. She remembered the feeling that had come over her, a certainty she could not explain. "I said you belonged here. You did, and you were right. I did not know it then, but this was where I was meant to be all along. With you, building this life together. You saved me, Beatrice, in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The years passed, bringing both challenges and joys. They had another child, a daughter they named Claire after Beatrice's mother. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, though there were hard years when drought or harsh winters tested their resolve. Marsh made a few more attempts to acquire their land, but each time they stood firm, and eventually he seemed to accept that they would not be moved. Emma married her teacher and had children of her own, visiting as often as the distance allowed. Benjamin grew into a strong, capable boy who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Claire was fearless and bright, keeping both her parents and her brother on their toes with her endless curiosity and adventurous spirit. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas and Beatrice hired a young woman from town to watch the children and took a rare day off together. They rode out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow with a view of the mountains that took Beatrice's breath away no matter how many times she saw it. They spread a blanket and shared a picnic lunch, talking about their plans for the future. Benjamin was 8 now and already showing an aptitude for working with horses. Claire, at 5, was begging to be allowed to ride on her own instead of in front of one of her parents. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Beatrice asked. "Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I found you in the barn, and other times it feels like we have been together forever." Lucas pulled her close, and she rested against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Best 10 years of my life. I used to think I was unlucky, the way things had gone for me. Losing my parents, losing the farm, all those years of drifting with nothing to show for it. But now I see that all of that was just the path that led me to you, and I would walk it all again if I knew you were waiting at the end. I love you, Lucas Ramsey, more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, Beatrice. You are my home, my heart, my everything." They kissed, And Beatrice felt the same spark she had felt that first time by the drainage ditch, the same certainty that this man was her destiny. As they rode back to the ranch in the golden afternoon light, Beatrice thought about all the moments that had led to this day. Her father's death that had left her alone and struggling. The hired hand who had quit to chase gold. The night Lucas had stumbled into her barn, desperate and hurt and lost. Each moment had been difficult at the time, but each had been necessary to bring them to where they were now. That evening, after the children were in bed, Lucas found Beatrice on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together over the years. He wrapped a shawl around her shoulders as the night air grew cool and sat beside her. "I have been thinking," he said, "about expanding the ranch. Old Henderson finally wants to sell his property, and if we could buy it, we would have enough land to really grow the operation, maybe bring Benjamin into the business properly when he is old enough. Can we afford it? I have been saving for years, putting aside every penny I could. And the horses have been selling well. I talked to the bank and they would be willing to give us a loan for the rest. It would be a risk, but I think it is a good one." Beatrice considered it. Taking on debt was scary, but they had proven over the past decade that they could make the ranch work. And having more land would give their children even more opportunities. "What does your instinct tell you? That we should do it, that we are ready? Then I trust you. Let us make the offer." They bought Henderson's land, and the additional acreage allowed them to expand their operations significantly. Lucas's horse breeding program became well known across Montana, and buyers came from as far as Wyoming and the Dakotas to purchase their stock. Beatrice proved to have a head for business, negotiating deals and managing their finances with a skill that impressed even the bankers in Helena, who had once doubted her ability to run a ranch. Benjamin grew into a young man who shared his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. Claire became an accomplished rider who could handle horses better than most of the ranch hands. They hired more workers as the operation grew, and the ranch that had once been a struggling operation became one of the most successful in the region. Theodore Marsh's own fortunes declined over the years. Bad investments and poor management took their toll, and eventually he was forced to sell his ranch to cover his debts. Lucas and Beatrice considered buying it, but ultimately decided against it. They had enough land, and the memory of Marsh's harassment left a bad taste. Instead, the property was bought by a young couple from back east who reminded Lucas and Beatrice of themselves starting out. They offered the couple advice and help when needed, remembering how hard those early years had been and wanting to make it easier for others following the same path. When Benjamin turned 18, Lucas officially made him a partner in the ranch. They celebrated with a family dinner, and Lucas gave a toast that brought tears to Beatrice's eyes. 18 years ago, I was sleeping in a barn because I had nowhere else to go. I thought my life was over, that I had failed at everything that mattered. Then your mother found me, and instead of turning me away, she gave me a chance. She saw something in me I could not see in myself. She told me I belonged here, and she was right. This ranch, this family, this life we have built together, this is where I belong. And now I get to watch our son take his place in that legacy, and I could not be prouder." Benjamin, who had his father's brown eyes and his mother's determination, raised his own glass. "Thank you, Pa, Ma, for building something worth inheriting, and for showing me what it means to work hard and love deeply. I promise to honor what you have created and to build on it for the next generation." Claire, 15 now and already making noises about wanting to attend college in the East, rolled her eyes at her brother's formality but was smiling. "Very eloquent, Ben, but can we eat now? I am starving." They all laughed, and the dinner continued with the easy warmth of a family who genuinely enjoyed being together. Later, When the children had gone to bed and Lucas and Beatrice were alone, they walked out to the barn where it had all started. "You remember which stall you were sleeping in?" Beatrice asked. Lucas led her to the corner where he had collapsed that night so long ago. "Right here. I had a headache from the beating I took. My ribs hurt so bad I could barely breathe, and I was wondering if this was as low as a man could get. And now I am standing in this same spot with the woman I love, thinking about our son becoming a partner in a successful ranch, about our daughter who is smart enough to do anything she sets her mind to, about the life we have built from absolutely nothing. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." Beatrice wrapped her arms around him. "I found you here, and you were exactly what I needed even though I did not know it. You gave me partnership, companionship, love. You turned this ranch from a burden I carried alone into a home we built together." "I had nowhere else to go," Lucas said softly, echoing his words from that first morning. "And I told you that you belonged here," Beatrice finished. "I was right, was I not? You were right about everything, you always are," she laughed. "I am not sure about that. But I was right about you, about us. I knew it from that first day, even if I could not have explained how." They stood in the barn, holding each other, surrounded by the sounds of horses shifting in their stalls and the sweet smell of hay. It was the same barn where they had met, but everything else had changed. The scared, hurt man and the overwhelmed, lonely woman were gone, replaced by two people who had built something beautiful and lasting together. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Beatrice looked up at the stars scattered across the Montana sky. She thought about all the unlikely moments that had brought them to this point, all the choices and chances that had woven their lives together. If her father had not died, if Lucas had not gotten into that fight in town, if he had chosen a different barn to sleep in that night, if she had called the sheriff instead of offering him breakfast, everything would be different. Their children would not exist. The ranch would not be what it was. They would not have found the love that had sustained them through a decade of challenges and triumphs. But all of those things had happened, in exactly the right way at exactly the right time, and now here they were. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Claire did go to college, studying literature and history, but she came back to Montana afterwards, unable to stay away from the wide skies and mountain vistas of home. She married a doctor from Helena, and they built a house on the edge of the ranch property where she could visit her parents easily. Benjamin married a rancher's daughter from the next county, a woman as strong and capable as his mother. They gave Lucas and Beatrice their first grandchild, a boy they named Lucas after his grandfather. When Lucas held his namesake for the first time, Beatrice saw tears in her husband's eyes. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "About my father, and how I used to worry I would never live up to his memory, about how I thought I had failed when we lost the farm. But now I see that maybe I did not fail. I just took a different path. And it led me to this, to being a grandfather, to having a legacy to pass on. My father would be proud, I think." "He would be," Beatrice agreed, "just as I am proud of you every single day." As they entered their 60s, Lucas and Beatrice gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, letting Benjamin and his wife take over while they served as advisors and helped with the grandchildren. They had 4 grandchildren now, and the ranch house was often full of the sound of young voices and running feet. One afternoon, while watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Lucas said, "We did well, did we not? Built something that will last beyond us." "We did very well," Beatrice agreed. She was older now, her hair more silver than brown, but her eyes were still bright and her spirit still strong. "Better than I ever imagined when I was a scared girl trying to run this ranch alone." "You were never really scared." You were the bravest person I ever met." "I was terrified," she admitted, "every single day, but then you came along, and suddenly I did not have to be brave alone anymore." Lucas took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to settle into his joints. "Thank you for not chasing me out of that barn," she laughed. "Thank you for staying." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play, watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. This was what they had worked for, what they had built together. Not just land and livestock, but family, legacy, love. As evening fell and the grandchildren were called in for supper, Lucas and Beatrice remained on the porch a little longer. The air was sweet with the scent of grass and wildflowers, and somewhere in the distance they could hear cattle lowing as they settled for the night. "I love you, Beatrice Abbott Ramsey," Lucas said, using her full name the way he did on special occasions. "I have loved you since that first morning when you showed me kindness instead of suspicion. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Lucas Ramsey, my unexpected gift, my partner, my heart. You came into my life when I needed you most, and you have been my greatest blessing every day since." They kissed, and it was sweet and familiar and still held the spark that had brought them together all those years ago. When they finally went inside to join their family for supper, they walked hand in hand, the way they had walked together through life for more than 3 decades. The ranch continued to thrive under Benjamin's management, and Lucas and Beatrice had the joy of seeing their grandchildren grow. The oldest, young Lucas, showed the same affinity for horses that his grandfather had. The others each had their own interests and talents, but all of them loved the ranch and understood that it was more than just land and animals. It was family history, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Emma came up from Denver with her children and grandchildren. Claire and her husband were there with their family. Benjamin and his wife had organized everything, decorating the house and preparing a feast. During the party, Benjamin stood up to make a toast. "Ma, Pa, 40 years ago you took a chance on each other. Pa, you were a drifter with nothing but the clothes on your back. Ma, you were struggling to keep this ranch alive, but you saw something in each other, something worth fighting for, and you built this." He gestured around at the gathered family, at the prosperous ranch visible through the windows. "You built a legacy of love and hard work that has blessed all of us. You showed us what it means to be partners, to face challenges together, to never give up on each other or on your dreams. Thank you for everything you have given us." There was not a dry eye in the room when he finished. Lucas and Beatrice stood together, overwhelmed by the love surrounding them. This was what they had created, not just a successful ranch, but a family that would carry their values forward into the future. "I only have one thing to say," Lucas said when he could trust his voice. "The best decision I ever made was sleeping in that barn. The second best was staying when Beatrice told me I belonged here. Everything good in my life came from those 2 moments. And I knew," Beatrice added, "from the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much or how wonderfully. Thank you, Lucas, for 40 years of love and partnership. Here is to 40 more." They all knew that 40 more years was unlikely at their age, but the sentiment was beautiful anyway. They had already had more time and more happiness than either of them had dared to hope for that morning in the barn so long ago. As Lucas and Beatrice grew older, their love only deepened. They had weathered so much together, survived so many challenges, celebrated so many triumphs. Their bodies grew slower, and their hair went white, but the connection between them remained as strong as ever. They made a habit of walking out to the barn every evening, weather permitting, to stand in the spot where they had first met. It was their ritual, their way of remembering and honoring the beginning of their story. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had slept in a different barn that night? Beatrice asked one evening as they made their slow way across the yard. Never, Lucas said firmly. It was not chance that brought me here. It was fate. I was always meant to find you, Beatrice. We were always meant to be together. I like to think so too. It makes all the hard times make sense, knowing they led us to each other. In the barn, surrounded by the familiar smells and sounds, they stood together as they had hundreds of times before. Lucas's arms went around Beatrice, and she leaned into his embrace, feeling safe and loved and home. I had nowhere else to go, Lucas whispered, repeating the words that had started everything. You belong here, Beatrice whispered back, finishing their ritual. Always and forever you belong here with me, and it was true. After 40 years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising children and grandchildren, of turning a struggling ranch into a thriving legacy, Lucas Ramsey belonged with Beatrice Abbott more than ever. They had started as two lonely people finding solace in each other, and they had become one heart, one soul, one unbreakable bond. Their story, which had begun with a desperate man sleeping in a barn and a woman brave enough to offer him a second chance, had become a testament to the power of love, trust, and partnership. It was a story their children and grandchildren would tell for generations, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most beautiful lives. As the sun set on another day, Lucas and Beatrice made their way back to the house, their steps slow but steady, their hands clasped together. Behind them, the barn stood quiet in the gathering darkness, a silent witness to the moment that had changed two lives forever. Inside the house, surrounded by family and love, they settled into their favorite chairs by the fireplace. Young Lucas, now a teenager, was reading to the younger grandchildren while Claire's daughter practiced piano in the next room. Benjamin and his wife were in the kitchen, laughing about something, and the whole house was filled with the warmth and noise of a family who loved being together. Lucas looked at Beatrice, and she looked back at him, and no words were needed. They had built this together. From nothing, from desperation and loneliness and a chance meeting in a barn, they had created everything that mattered. Thank you, Lucas said quietly, just for her. For what? For telling me I belonged here. For seeing me when I could not see myself. For loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Beatrice reached over and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. Thank you for staying. For being brave enough to accept what I offered. For working so hard to build our dreams. For loving me and our children and our grandchildren with your whole heart. You are the best man I have ever known, Lucas Ramsey, and I am grateful for you every single day. They sat together as the evening deepened into night, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they would leave behind. Outside, the Montana stars came out one by one, the same stars that had shone down on a desperate man seeking shelter in a barn and a lonely woman who had taken a chance on a stranger. It had been more than 40 years since that night, but the love that had begun in that barn had only grown stronger with time. It had sustained them through every challenge, celebrated with them through every triumph, and given meaning to every day they spent together. And when, years later, Lucas finally passed peacefully in his sleep with Beatrice holding his hand, she took comfort in knowing that they had lived every moment fully, loved each other completely, and built something that would endure long after they were gone. She lived several more years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the love story she and Lucas had created. And when her time came, she passed peacefully in the same house where she had lived her whole life, in the same room where she had brought her children into the world, on the same land that had witnessed her greatest struggles and her greatest joys. Benjamin found a letter she had left for the family, to be read after she was gone. In it, she told the story of finding Lucas in the barn, of the words they had exchanged that changed everything. She wrote about how love could come from the most unexpected places, how trust and partnership could transform lives, how two people working together could build something far greater than either could create alone. "Your father and I started with nothing," she wrote. "But we had each other, and that was everything. We built this ranch, this family, this legacy, not through grand gestures but through small acts of love and commitment every single day. We chose each other every morning, worked together every afternoon, and held each other every night. That is the secret to a good life, to a good marriage, to happiness. Choose each other, work together. Never give up on your love." The letter became a treasured family heirloom, read at weddings and anniversaries, a reminder of where they had all come from and what they should aspire to. The ranch continued for generations, and while it grew and changed with the times, it never lost the essential character that Lucas and Beatrice had given it. And in the barn, the corner where Lucas had slept that fateful night was preserved and marked with a simple plaque that read, "Here two souls found each other. Here love began. Here our story started." It became a family tradition for newly married couples to visit the spot, to stand where Lucas and Beatrice had first met, and to remember that the greatest love stories often begin in the most ordinary places, with the most unexpected encounters. The ranch that had once been a burden for a young woman struggling alone became a symbol of what was possible when two people found each other at exactly the right moment. The story of the cowboy who had nowhere else to go, and the woman who told him he belonged, became the foundation of a family legacy that spanned generations. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Lucas and Beatrice were together again, their love undiminished by time or death, eternal as the Montana sky they had both loved so much. They had found each other when they both needed it most, had built a beautiful life together, and had left the world better than they found it. Their story, which began with such simple words in a dusty barn on a spring morning, had become a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of taking chances on people, and the beautiful things that can grow from the smallest seeds of kindness and connection. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth living up to. And every spring, when the Montana wildflowers bloomed and the mountains stood sharp against the blue sky, the family gathered at the ranch to celebrate not just Lucas and Beatrice, but everything they represented. Love found in unexpected places, second chances that changed lives, partnerships built on trust and respect, families created through dedication and hard work. The barn still stood, weathered but strong, a monument to the moment when a desperate man and a courageous woman took a chance on each other and changed their destinies forever. And if you stood very still in that corner where it all began, you could almost hear the echo of their voices, speaking the words that started everything. "I had nowhere else to go. You belong here." 3 simple statements that contained a whole world of possibility, of hope, of love. 3 statements that proved sometimes the best things in life come not from careful planning, but from being brave enough to trust your instincts and open your heart to unexpected possibilities. And so the story ended where it began, in a barn in Montana, with love and belonging and the understanding that home is not just a place but a person, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we have the courage to tell someone they belong.